Welcome to our demonstration of vendor price lists, or as it used to be known, vendor price matrix for Microsoft Dynamics GP. What this product is for is if you want to have price lists for your vendors, similar to customer price lists, that you want to have automatically default in on your purchase orders, depending on the currency, depending on the quantity range of the order, depending on the vendor and the item. We have the ability to keep track of that vendor price list information. So first, I'm going to kind of show you one of the vendors here and where we can see that information. So for this particular vendor, we can see that there is one record set up in pricing for this particular line item. And you can either add these manually or you can import them. Most people are going to use the import to import in those vendor price matrix records. So in here, we can browse to a file. It could potentially be every vendor, every item, every price break, every currency, all separate lines. In here, we can clear out any or all existing records before we import it in. So some people will completely bring in a whole new file for all of their vendor item pricing to replace what was there before. So one of the ways to do that is to mark delete and then import the file into a clean set of pricing. The other way is we can leave stuff there and just update the vendor items if they already exist. They'll just be replaced by new records in the import. One of the other things that we can do is help you avoid that annoying, hey, do you want me to create the vendor item record automatically? So for all vendor items, we can automatically create the vendor item record in GP for you so that those records are easier to work with. Once we import that file, then we would see the information that we were looking at previously in this particular screen. Now, we could also potentially edit this. So if I come in here, I can edit this as either a specific price where we're using a specific unit cost, or it can be a discount off of a list price. So if you maintain a list price in your system and you just want to automatically calculate based off of that discount off of list, we can do that for an entire item class, or we can do it for a specific item, either way when we're dealing with the discount off of list. So some contracts you'll have 20% off list, recommended manufacturer's list price. We can automatically handle that by putting a 20% in the discount from list price area. We can also just edit this on the screen. So if I wanted to click in here and type a new specific unit cost, I can do that as well. If it was brought in from a contract and an activated contract, we can actually drill back to the contract. So we can see in here, there's a contract ID. So if that contract is still here, let me check and see in my demo data if I really do have that. I think it was test 2002. Let's go back to that screen again. Test 2002. So if I'm on this, I can actually drill back to the vendor contract from the detail record. And those detailed records are contract lines when it comes to creating a contract and activating a contract in the future. So one of the things, let's walk through that. On a contract, when we set up a contract, we'll keep it in history after it's been replaced. When we create a brand new one, if I type in test 999 and I select and say this contract is for advanced office systems, maybe they have some kind of vendor quote number. but that I want it to start on a certain date, I can put the begin date here, and if it is in the future, I would set this up. This is the header. We have user-defined fields for both the contract header and the contract lines. So all of this is whatever information you want to store about the contract in here. The other thing you can do is when you save this and go to the contract lines, it looks very similar, you'll notice, to the vendor price matrix itself, and that's intentional because each of these lines is going to create a record much like the vendor price matrix record. So in here we have the ability to put in, again, whether it's a discount off a list or if it's a specific unit cost. Maybe this is 190 with the US currency. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's a different price range. 1 to 10 is one price, 10 to 20 is a different price, whatever that is. And if I save that, you'll notice that now the contract line has this particular record here. And if we close out of this and save, I go back to that. Where's my 999 test? I saved it. I thought I saved it. There we go. So we come back in here. We can see the lines associated with that, and we can activate it manually or deactivate manually. We can copy from a previous contract and then make edits to it. And we can update contract totals. So if we're tracking things about the contract usage, we have the ability to track that as well. And the other way this can be activated is either from a screen here where we can activate multiple contracts where the begin date is within a date range. So if it has a date, begin date that's within these two dates, then it will activate all of those contracts. And then the last possibility is we might want it on the day of, have it automatically update that particular thing. So if we look at this, one of the things we can do is automatic activation of contracts on login. So the first person who logs into GP that day, where the begin date matches, then it'll automatically activate that contract as well. We have a couple different things. If you don't have a vendor price set up, what do you want it to do? Do you want it to use just a list price? Do you want it to use the last received cost like GP normally does? A zero cost, standard cost, or no change at all? In this case, we're using zero cost so that people can know if there's a purchase order that defaulted in zero, because you would want to make sure you got a vendor price record set up for that. And also we have the option to, if there are any POs where there wasn't a vendor price matrix record found, that it would also place the PO on hold with whatever price that was defaulting in with that unit cost. So let's go look and see, now that we have that price there for that vendor, if I go in to start a purchase order and I select that vendor that we were looking at, Advanced Office Systems, and I go ahead and I put in the 128 SD RAM, I put in the box, put in a quantity of 1. You'll see that as soon as I put in the quantity and it knows it can evaluate what quantity range that the vendor price is based off of, it can take that and automatically default in the price that we had there on that purchase order. At this point, we can save that purchase order. And if we go to the last PO there, you'll see that we've got the $200 unit price here. In our settings, we can lock this down so people can't change that. If you have people who put in the wrong thing, you can block that in the company setup screen we have the enforce vendor item cost on purchase orders, and that checkbox would prevent people from making any changes to what's defaulting in on that. Let's see what else here. Close any received purchase. We have a few extra utilities or routines we have, so you can, if you have purchase orders within a date range that you want to move to history, we automate that process for you. And then update contract summary totals here as well. So we have some summary tables that track how much purchase orders, invoiced, received, et cetera, against the purchase order. All right, so we've talked about those two things, generating those vendor price matrix records and how those price matrix records can default in the correct pricing for your purchase orders to make sure that that's always correct. You have the ability to import either directly to those records, or you can import contract header and contract lines in our imports for having a little more structured price list in terms of a contract. So that can be imported in as well. And then when you activate the contract, it generates the price matrix records that we saw underneath the vendor level. Thank you for listening. This has been a presentation of vendor price matrix or vendor price lists for Dynamics GP.